Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Excited to be here today. Lots to talk about, and lots in the area of the world that I care most about, which is MAHA, health freedom, and those sorts of things. Some really interesting stuff. You got a Joe Rogan, just bombshell of an interview. And Elon Musk responded this morning. And that's kind of an interesting thing because we've got a lot of people being forced to look at the truth about vaccines. And the truth about vaccines is that they're disastrous across the board. And it's not just the COVID vaccine, it's all vaccines. The reality is that there have been absolutely zero double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials that have tested for efficacy in terms of preventing spread, in terms of prevention of death, and in terms of prevention of symptomatic disease on any vaccines. Not one vaccine has had a double-blind, clinical controlled placebo trial. Not one. They don't measure absolute risk reduction. They don't measure anything. The science on vaccines is some of the most profoundly fraudulent trash on the planet. And, if Elon Musk really wants to do something, he ought to DOGE vaccine science. You want to do DOGE? DOGE vaccine science. You want to find fraud? Well, the only thing that might actually be more shocking than the fraud in our federal government is the fraud in the world of vaccines. They are garbage across the board. And I say this as someone who was pro-vax until COVID hit. I thought vaccines were great back in the day. I started doing research and holy cow, Sherry Tenpenny was right. It ought to be trending on Twitter. Sherry Tenpenny was right. It should be everywhere. The reality is that these are unsafe, untested, unknown, just garbage interventions that were so unsafe and so untested that we actually had to pass a law to allow them to be on the market, preventing the manufacturers from being sued. Think about that. Can you imagine putting a product on the market that's such trash, that's such garbage, that you have to go to the government and say, listen, if you want our product on the market, you're going to have to pass a law so that no one can sue us when we kill people. By the way, if you do that, we'll make sure that we kick back a lot of money towards y'all, because that's the big pharma model. That's the vaccine model. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it is what it is. No other industry in the planet is more protected than big pharma. None. These guys are a joke. And again, no science to back it whatsoever. So anyways, for anybody under a rock, Joe Rogan had a huge interview on this. It's crazy viral, and even Elon Musk responded. We're going to get into that today. And then I'm going to offer you this. So everybody wants to say, oh, no, vaccines, there might actually be something wrong. People are starting to wake up to the truth of the matter that vaccines are fraud and garbage and that this whole thing was a scheme. Well, let me offer you this. What about chemtrails? What? What are you saying, Renz? That's nonsense. Right. So were vaccines until they weren't. Here's the thing. I want to today talk a little bit about chemtrails. I want to go through some of the arguments. We have 25 or so states working on legislation to ban chemtrails. Why? Did you guys know? They say that these are the condensation. They say that these are condensation and that they are the result of atmospheric conditions that allow for these things to persist. Let me give you a few facts on this, a few facts on chemtrails. Did you know that for a persistent chemtrail, right? A persistent chemtrail, one that's going to last for more than 30 minutes, especially, right? Most chemtrails, common ones, anything at 1 to 5 minutes. If conditions in the weather conditions in the sky are saturated humidity, different things, may last 5 to 30 minutes. For conditions where things are super saturated, maybe 30 minutes to several hours. Only in the rarest cases are things in perfect weather conditions can these things last longer than that, right? We're talking, 10 to 20% of the cases would allow for, these supersaturated conditions. So why is it that every time I look up, I see contrails up there or chemtrails up there that last for hours and hours and hours, if not days? Well, we're going to get into all that. We're going to get into a whole bunch more than that. It's insanity, right? It is insanity. And I got to tell you guys, the conspiracy theories, well, they're largely being proven true. There's a lot to talk about on that, a lot more. Before I get into too much of it, I want to ask you, please consider supporting us. GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw, GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw, or TomRens.com. Either one, go there, GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw or TomRens.com. You have to type them out because, we're censored. But go there and please become a monthly donor. $20 a month. It's a Starbucks a week. It keeps us fighting. It keeps us going. Your help can make a big impact, big difference for us. So please, whatever you can do to help us, we would be grateful. And then also, while you're at TomRens.com, www.tomrens.com, go to our affiliate page and support our affiliates. With all of these, you get a deal. These are all sponsors. These are all people that pay us for doing what we do. Good people who I believe in, who I think have great products, great services. And, as I look through these, I want to really highlight Kingdom Fuel and the Kingdom Fuel shakes. They're delicious. They're meal replacement, vitamins, minerals, everything you need. And if you take these instead of a meal, you'll lose weight. They're great weight loss products. And they're healthy. So please consider Kingdom Fuel through TomRens.com. You can go to Sherwood.tv/TomRens as well. All right. I want to get into chemtrails, but before I do, I got a couple other random things. Has anybody seen Snow White? I hope not. But Snow White is trending right now. Do you know why Snow White is trending? It's trending as one of the biggest flops in Disney history, which is saying something because Disney has sucked really badly lately. Between what they've done to Marvel and everything else, Disney continues to flop and continues to suck. And this scumbag piece of garbage, little 23-year-old jerk of an actress, this, what's her name? Rachel Zegler. I mean, I don't even know who the heck she is, but she's just some entitled little jerk. I'm trying not to swear, folks. I'm trying very hard. I know, we run our show on his glory and we've got partners and we're trying not to swear here. But anyways, Rachel Zegler is out there, posting things about F you to Donald Trump. She says, yep, I am a nasty B word. Just an obnoxious little jerk. And she's tanked the movie. I mean, as if the movie wasn't going to be tanked anyways. I mean, you've got to figure when you don't hire dwarfs to act the part of the seven dwarfs, and instead you hire people who represent DEI, the movie's already set up for failure. But then you got this mouthy little jerk out there running her mouth. And yeah, I mean, this movie right now, I believe it's somewhere around 1.8 rating out of 10. So, that's good. I'm glad. I hope it goes down to about a 0.8 rating or lower. This has got to be one of the worst things ever. I am quite sure I'm not going to see it. So you can tell me that you like the movie, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to find out ever. There's a reason that we canceled our subscription long ago to Disney Plus and why we won't get it back. This trash is just not something that's going to ever be paid for in my house or supported with my money. So we got that going on. I want to hit this before we get into the chemtrails or some of these other things. This is really important to me. I'm pro-life here, and Alex Jones broke this. And I want to show you this clip because if this doesn't make you sick, this is the Democrat Party right here. This is Speaker Julie McCluskey of the Colorado House of Representatives. I want you to hear what this piece of trash is saying. Okay, think about this.
That savings comes from the averted births that will not occur because abortions happened instead. So a birth is more expensive than an abortion. So the savings comes in Medicaid births that will not occur. This bill will actually decrease costs for our healthcare policy and financing department, our Medicaid expenditures in both this year and out years, as the savings from averted births outweigh the cost of covering reproductive health care for all Coloradans. This bill requires all abortion services to be state funded. The bill requires an increase to general fund of $1.5 million to cover the cost for care. But again, a reminder that ultimately the state will see a cost savings. And ultimately, it is truly an honor to be here carrying this bill alongside Rep. Garcia, and I ask for your support of Senate Bill 183.
Okay. So trash, human excrement trash, Julie McCluskey of Colorado is providing her support and her argument that they need to pass this bill to pay for abortions in Colorado because it will save them money to kill the babies rather than to allow them to be born. Colorado, this is what you got. You guys are saving money by killing babies. Isn't that wonderful? Now, guess what? For those of you leftists out there, not that any of you are listening, but for any of you leftists out there, I'd ask you this. Who do you think's getting killed here? Who do you think they're targeting? I will bet you anything. Let's talk about disproportionate impact. Who are you killing? Killing minority babies, aren't you? Killing minority babies. This targets minority babies. Who are they implying when they say, well, Medicaid? They say Medicaid, Medicare savings. They're worried about who they're have to pay. They're targeting minority babies because these racist garbage people would rather kill babies, especially minority babies, than to allow them to have a chance. Instead of creating a system that works where you can create productive people, good people, no, they want to kill them before they're born. And Speaker Julie McCluskey wants to save money by murdering babies. Isn't that nice? God, what the hell happened to Colorado? Unbelievable. All right. I also want to get to, let's see, one last thing. This is Jonathan Turley. So Jonathan Turley is a attorney. He's a constitutional law professor, and he's a sharp guy. And I kind of like this clip about this is the reality, and this is true. This is an accurate portrayal of what Trump's executive order related to citizens and voting. This is a very good synopsis of what's going to happen with this.
Executive order requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. Some Democrats already calling this illegal. Let's bring in Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney, GWU law professor, and Fox News contributor. Great to have you with us. I want to circle back on some of what David was reporting on in a moment, Jonathan, if I may, and thank you for being with us. But with regard to the president's EO on proving that you're a citizen to vote, this is something he talked about a lot on the campaign trail. And this is what the executive order involves. It says voter ID proving U.S. citizenship required to register to vote. Mail ballots must be cast and received by Election Day. No QR code ballots allowed, and foreign nationals barred from donating to elections. How's this going to go, Jonathan?
That's a good question, because both sides have strong arguments to make here. The Constitution allows the states to determine the time and manner of elections, but this is an EO going to federal elections and the conditions under which the federal government wants them to occur. And so it's going to be a colossal challenge. At the same time, Congress is moving forward with legislation that would dictate things like voter ID, which are very popular with citizens. Now, the legislation is the strongest way to do this. You can condition federal funding on a compliance, a uniformity with these elections. I think most citizens favor voter ID. They favor that type of uniformity. But this is going to be challenged, and quite frankly, it's a jump ball. The states have arguments that this is traditionally an area left to them. There's also an argument that this commission is a so-called independent commission, which is something the Trump administration is pushing back on in a number of areas. They're saying there isn't any independent parts of the executive branch. It's part of one executive branch, and there's one person at the head of that branch, and his name is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That is really critical there. So there's a couple things I want to unpack. First of all, the independent administrative bodies, that can't exist under the Constitution. That can't exist. That's the bureaucracy. There are 3 branches of government under the Constitution. If they want to create a 4th bureaucratic branch, they're going to have to do an amendment. Otherwise, anything under the executive branch is under the executive branch's purview. Suck it up, left, and deal with it. You cannot undermine Trump. You cannot undermine his position, and you cannot undermine his authority by pretending that you've got an independent commission that was created by what? I'm sorry, it's just not constitutional. So that's that. Also, remember, federal elections are subject to a federal election law. They can quite clearly control funding for federal elections. So there is a lot of authority here. Now, if Congress passes this is a no-brainer. But if Congress doesn't, then it's a little bit more challenging. So I agree with Turley. We're going to see what happens here in the courts. But ultimately the best solution here is for Congress to get off its butt and do something. All right. I want to move on to chemtrails. I want to move on. Then we're going to get to vaccines. We're going to go through vaccines in great detail in the second half of the show. But I want to start out with chemtrails, right? So the big thing with chemtrails is we've got to get past the fact that they're claiming these are conspiracy theories. And this is a complicated issue, right? I can look up in the sky and I can see chemtrails, okay? But the experts claim that these aren't chemtrails, they're just natural condensation. Now, I'm 48 years old. When I was a kid, I saw all sorts of contrails, which are condensation. But after I would watch them. I remember laying on because I grew up in the country. We didn't have much to do. So I played outside 24/7. And I used to play, I used to track animals and play in the woods and do country things. And sometimes I would just lay and look at the clouds. And I used to watch the chemtrails, except they weren't chemtrails back then. They were actually contrails. They would dissipate very, very quickly, very quickly. And by the way, I live in the same area I grew up. So what never happened is you'd never see a contrail from following a plane that would stay there for hours and hours. It never happened, ever. Okay? So something's changed. What is it? You've got to believe your own eyes, folks. For anybody old enough to remember that, just believe your own eyes. Something's changed. Now, it's amazing because with the chemtrails argument, we literally have something we can see that they're lying to us about. This is akin to telling me that no matter how, look at the sky, I'm looking out my window. Looks like the sky is blue. It's a little bit of gray because I live in Ohio, but it's blue, right? This is akin to trying to convince me that the sky is green and that I'm seeing some sort of an optical illusion. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I can see it's blue. I can see chemtrails sitting up in the sky for hours and hours on end. The idea that they don't exist is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So, listen, you've got a situation where it's very clear to me that you have something going on that's changed, right? But they've effectively lied to people, and they said, no, it's the science. Follow the science, right? Well, let's follow the science here. Let's follow the science. So, you know what? And my friend Mark is here. Let's bring Mark on. So I want to get Mark's impression on this. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing well, Tom. It's good to see you, man. You doing okay?
I am on a rant right now.
Look out, man. You got cheese with that too, or no?
I always have cheese.
Yeah.
I actually have a piece of cheese sitting over here waiting for me to get done with the show. So Mark, we're talking a little bit about chemtrails.
Okay.
And the big thing with chemtrails is they tell us that they're not real. It's just condensation.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, okay, when I was a kid, I remember looking up and I would see contrails. In a few minutes, they'd disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see grids of trails that lasted for 12 hours. So something's changed, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an argument. I want your impression on this, right? Because this has a lot to do with our health. If they're spraying something in the sky, and reports are that these are aluminum and barium are main things that they're spraying. Those are neurotoxins. Those are a big deal. You can't spray that crap. That's a disaster. So I want to make an argument here. All right. So going back, we've got history. So I say chemtrails are all made up. There's no such thing. This whole thing is nonsense, right? All right. So military, documented history. Vietnam, Operation Popeye, right? Classified program. They seeded clouds with silver iodide to create monsoon rains, right? So it's cited. I got the Pentagon Papers. I got weather modification hearings, all sorts of things, right? So we know that there's historical precedent for weather modification. It's real. It's indisputable. This is going back to the 60s, 70s. So we know that it's not only real, but it's probably gotten a lot more effective since then. Okay, next part of the argument, legal framework, right? So we've got a ton of laws recognizing weather modification. Not one of them bans it. A number of them enable it, actually, including Biden executive orders and other such things. But the Weather Modification Act in 1972 actually mandates, it not only recognizes it's a real thing, but it mandates reporting to NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. So they have to report it when it's happening, unless, we'll get to the unless in a minute, but they have to report if it's happening, but it's a real thing. Okay, so we have historical precedent, we have law acknowledging that it's real and creating requirements. Now, then we move on to, patents, right? Now, patents aren't proof something's occurring, but they're proof that someone believes something's possible. There are dozens and dozens of patents on this. Particularly relevant is the stratospheric Welshberg seeding, which proposes the use of aluminum oxide to deflect sunlight. That's called solar radiation management, SRM, which is something that's been studied by Harvard and other major universities. It's a big thing. You've got powder contrail generation patent, right? Details creating persistent trails with metal powders. Persistent trails. That's kind of weird. It's almost like we see those. We got patent 7645326, which describes aluminum oxide clouds as radio signal reflectors with aerial deployment. We see a number of, there's a whole slew of patents is essentially what I'm getting at, right? So now we also know that China during the 2008 Olympics used weather modification techniques to ensure that the weather was good for the Olympics, right? We know that the U.S. Used Project Storm Fury to try and seed and weaken hurricanes, right? We also know that there's a number of weather modification companies today, like Weather Modification Incorporated. So these are all things that are happening. Now, meanwhile, we've got these observations, not only what we see in the air, but we also have a number of independent lab tests, right? One particular test in California in 2007, Shasta County found that aluminum levels were 61,000 times above natural baselines in rainwater, following a bunch of air contrails, right? Now, that plus these chemtrails, which just stay up there forever, that's another chink in this armor that this doesn't exist. We have CIA, NASA, NOAA, all came together in 2013 National Academy of Sciences study on solar radiation management via stratospheric aerosols, right? So chemtrails. 2016, CIA Director John Brennan spoke at the CFR about solar radiation management's potential, calling it feasible and inexpensive. No denial. Didn't say they weren't using it. This is under Obama, 2016, right? So you've got that happening, right? So then you see also that there's international acknowledgement. There's some international bans and other such things that are out there. So you've got all these different things coming together. So now the question becomes, is there a chance that this is real? What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think you laid out a good case there, counsel. Through circumstantial evidence, I think you have a really good case that it's real. If I was a juror, my vote would be yes, it's real. I wouldn't have a doubt on that one in my own mind. I think too, and my wife and I have observed these things. If you go way out somewhere, like in the country, outside the city, maybe in a different country, and you see a different state of the sky.
Yeah.
Or recently in the country of Mexico. And my wife and I had this conversation, unbeknownst to me, we would have this conversation today. And we looked up and we saw the sky. We were lying on our backs, partially umbrella covered. And the sky was blue.
Wow.
Chemtrails, it was blue. And I thought, that's amazing. And my wife said to me, Mark, you know what? She said, we don't see those crisscross lines look like saying somebody's playing tic-tac-toe in the air. And she was kidding, but she was not kidding.
No.
We saw airplanes coming by that had the vapor that would come out the back and it would disappear.
Yeah.
And we had this conversation, probably lasted about 10 minutes. Now, when you come back here, you immediately see on a clear day, not a clear sky anymore. And I think with that question, as you noted, Tom, we've had the ability to cloud seed for a long, long time. That's happening. It's been talked about, discussed. Laws have been made, policies have been made. Of course it's there. And I think with anything else, we have a good standing to know if it's there, it's probably happening beyond what we see, what we know, because of experimentation purposes that are going on right now. So I'm with you on this 100%.
Okay, well, good. Then let me give you the second half of the argument. Because that's only one half. How about that? We've got to make sure that we're thorough here, right?
Yeah.
So in January 27th, 2021, Joe Biden issued Executive Order 14008, and he declared climate change a national security priority, directing agencies like, guess what, the DOD to assess and act on its risks. Oh, well, that's a pretty important thing, right? Because guess what that does? That now allows the DOD to privately and without having to report anything to NOAA,
It's classified.
either act on or contract to act on these sorts of things. So because he did this through the military, he could get this done in a way that was classified, and no one had to report anything. The military could do public-private contracts, or they could do it themselves and seed the cloud. Now, it's interesting because we have tons of reports about planes with huge chemtrails coming out from back of them, but when someone looks them up on the flight tracker apps, they don't exist. Well, why is that? The military. Biden authorized it. So now we have, the claim of global climate urgency. You got Gates Foundation, the WEF, the Rockefeller Foundation, all these guys, they're pushing SRM, solar radiation management, cloud seed, whatever they have to do to save our planet by poisoning us with aluminum and barium and everything else. So they're doing that right now. Meanwhile, under Obama, you had massive, or Obama and Biden, you have massive funding for anything climate change. So these NGOs are getting money from USAID and federal contracts to fight climate change that they can then partner with our federal government and create these large-scale geoengineering projects that nobody knows about because it's under the guise of national security, right? So John Brennan's 2016 CFR speech called SRM, inexpensive and feasible. And then you got these patents, all these different things. And Brennan was a CIA director. You want to know where this is going? This is being done through our military intelligence apparatus. CIA, I guarantee, is partnered in a number of places. And guess who else isn't subject to FOIAs? CIA and international NGOs. NGOs from around the world. We can partner with the World Economic Forum. We can partner with all these different groups to get this done, and there's no problem. There's no hesitation. DOD controls restricted airspace, right? So they can do this. And under the law, pursuant to the law, you've got to understand something. Biden has authority, if he declares something a national security threat, to run operations like this. Mm-hmm. You know, now Trump may not even know about these things unless he's looking for it, right? There's no way, because these aren't going to be like, you know, things that are going to sit on his and come up in front of him in front of his report. You get the National Security Act, which is 50 USC 3001, that would allow the military to do this without reporting to NOAA. They don't have to report anything. So this could all be done secretly. And it could be done through these different things. You've got the Gates Foundation. They funded something called SCOPAX. Silver Lining lobbied for solar radiation management. WS done it. All these different groups. The White House actually explicitly mentioned a number of these proposals and different things, and their partnerships through USAID and EPA. Again, because of the National Security Declaration, all this can be done secretly. Now, we've got the technological feasibility, which we've already talked about everything. And so you've got motive, you've got opportunity, you've got data, you've got evidence. To me, the fact that I can see this with my own eyes when I look up, I've got motive, I've got opportunity, I've got evidence. I would win this if this were a court case. I win this on preponderance of the evidence, and I might even be able to get to reasonable doubt on this, because this is absolutely indisputable that there is something going on. And the fact that they're trying to pretend that what we see with our own eyes isn't real is an absurdity. Am I missing something here, Mark? What is the hole in my arguments?
There's not holes in the arguments, Tom. You're laying out the facts as they have been put out there. And the facts that they've been put out there does not alleviate the question, is there other stuff that's not out there? And you raise the doubt that there probably is, right? So I think that, that the evidence is there. And certainly I look at it from the angle of our health. You mentioned the neurotoxic effects, right, of those chemicals that are in the sky. We also know that we live in a world of toxic pollutants that are in our environment, atmosphere, et cetera. And I don't think it's a hard leap for one RFK to say to the president, can you look into this if you're really concerned about America's health? And I think, to me, that would be the great angle to look at, because at that point in time, you're going to be able to sort of maybe uncover it a little bit. And I think that'd be a good way to get behind it, hopefully. But again, I don't trust our government at all. I'll just say that right up front right now. I think it's just a bunch of bureaucracy nonsense, and I think America's suffering for it.
It's 100% that, and I'm going to be putting together a report on all of this. It's going to be extensive, and it's going to be an important thing. So I will have that coming up. But at the end of the day, Mark, let's focus on the things that there's evidence for. Mm-hmm. As a healthcare guru, let's talk about barium and aluminum. How are those for your body? Well,
obviously, they're not natural substances in vast amounts for our body. The body's able to detoxify some of those. Some barium is used, obviously, in some imaging studies, and we know aluminum is ubiquitous for our society. It's used
especially in vaccines.
Exactly, it's used in things like vaccines, but it's also used in deodorant. So there's a lot of that around there, and we got to realize that the body's is really amazing in its ability to handle something a little bit for a little bit of time, probably a lot of it for a lot of time. But ultimately, that reaches a load that it can't handle. And Tom, we have seen the incredible rise of disease processes such as cancer, that I think is most definitely tied to the level of toxicity, which damages our cells and it creates this level of dysfunction in our body systemically. So I think we've got to, the things that we have control over, it's just seems like less and less these days, but then we need to control what we put in our bodies from a liquid source, what we drink, what we eat, what we do with our bodies, because frankly, if we don't control it and don't take control of it, that's the only chance we have in this current environment.
Yeah, well, for sure. I think that one of the things that we've got to be aware of, so I mean, there are very, very tight controls on exposure to things like aluminum. I mean, it's a very, it's toxic as hell. I mean, unless it's in vaccines. So when it's in vaccines, they can't get enough of it in your arm. They love aluminum.
You gotta have a deodorant too, of course, we know that.
Yeah, deodorant too, which is, by the way, one of the things that I want to point, because I'm going to get into, I got a whole thing on vaccines I'm going to be getting into in a second. But one of the things that's really interesting is we look at the autism, some of these other things, and we see that, aluminum is a candidate for potentially having an impact on some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Potentially causing some of these health issues, because, what they'll say is they'll look at a vaccine, they'll say, well, there's only X amount of aluminum in this vaccine, so it's fine. Well, first of all, that's if you trust them. And second of all, that's true, but you have 100 more vaccines they're going to put in your arm. So, you got to look at the total cumulative dosage that you're going to be getting and recognize that that's a bit of an issue. So, I mean, that's one of the things. But the other thing is that we're actually exposed to a lot of these chemicals elsewhere. It's not just deodorant, but deodorant's a great one. For example, if you use an antiperspirant, so the deodorant versus antiperspirant, antiperspirants are generally powered by aluminum.
Yep.
And if you put it on your skin to block the sweat, it's blocking the sweat because it's going into your skin. It's being absorbed. Your body, you're literally absorbing aluminum every time you put on an antiperspirant. And I'm not advocating for everyone to stink, but there are natural alternatives out there, right?
Yes.
That don't involve aluminum, which is going to every day that you put that on. And don't get me wrong, there's a couple. If I'm going to be in certain situations, I can't be a sweaty pig, but there are. It's not good for you. It is not healthy. It's not safe, and it is absorbed into your body. Am I wrong?
No, you want to hear something crazy? If you go look at this from a biochemical standpoint, people can look this up. Aluminum impairs some of the methylation processes. Methylation is a biochemical reaction that occurs millions of times in every cell, and partially what it does, it helps with detoxification. It helps with, formation of babies in utero, right? It's all about that. So you won't have birth defects. It's helps with energy creation. It helps with creation of neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine, so we won't be depressed all the time. So you're talking about the inhibitor of all those processes right there when it gets to a certain level. And people can look this up, that aluminum will impair that process. And when it does, you got a society that's going to be very sick and dysfunctional. And you mentioned autism. It is well known that with autism, which by the way is 1 in about 30 right now in most studies, trending towards 1 in 2 by 2050, it is well known that persons on the autism spectrum do not methylate well. So again, you've got a cause, effect, and a cause here that's chasing each other. And I think that we have got to get a hold of this. There's things we can do to alleviate some of the aluminum that we're doing, of course,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a crucial thing and something that we really got to look at. So anyways, I've got a ton more, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about this because I'm quite convinced that where there's smoke, there's fire. And I do believe that we've got a real situation here going with these chemtrails, and I think it's something we got to look at. Speaking of methylation, doesn't the H2, doesn't your water, or the H2, does the hydrogen help to kind of keep your mitochondria and to help with all that?
It does. I was having some right now. I was thinking about
that's what made me think of it.
Man, you're freaking me out with all this presence of aluminum everywhere. No, this actually, I just charged my bottle and ran it for 10 minutes, but now I'm drinking the hydrogen that's carried from the water, and the hydrogen is going into my body, being carried by the water, but it penetrates your mitochondria because of its molecular size. And people have heard of free radicals, which drive intracellular inflammation processes, right? Which will drive the cells to dysfunction. Hydrogen is the only thing that we produce somewhat, but we can take in a lot, that turns these free radicals that really can cause us harm and turns them into water, something that causes a life. So this is something really everybody ought to do. And I have this, many times a day, many times a day.
Yep, 100%. Make sure you're checking it out. Great product. I like it. I use it. It's there.
Here's to intracellular health.
Amen, brother. Amen. I gotta refill mine here. I gotta get my third or fourth one of those yet going there today. But all right, so I want to shift gears a little bit because we had a pretty big deal happen, right? So Joe Rogan, he has on his show a really interesting Suzanne Humphreys, who's got a great book about vaccines, and her information is really well, to call it striking is, I mean, it's shocking, right? And it's about the polio vaccine, some of these other stuff, and this is new stuff for a lot of people, right? For a lot of people, they don't realize what's going on. But the reality is, for us in health freedom, we've known about the dangers of vaccines for a long time. For me, and the irony to this whole thing is, 6 years ago in 2019, I was still pro-vax, but COVID woke me up.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've become a bit of a fighter on this whole vax issue since then. But it's a really interesting thing when I look at this, right? So you've got this nonsense about vaccines starting to hit the mainstream. And so Rogan is out there talking about, how shocked he was and how amazed he was and how much gaslighting and nonsense there is out there about vaccines. Rogan is huge, obviously, big platform. So he does a show and it's completely viral right now. And so today I see that Elon Musk commented on the topic. And here I'm going to show you. So this is a big deal. So Musk says, if I'm forced to choose between greatly improved sanitation vaccines, sanitation matters much more. But vaccines, essentially training your immune system for battle, do work well for addressing many diseases. The essence of science is continually looking at evidence to lessen the error between your understanding of reality and reality itself. I agree with Musk's take on science, but let's talk about that. Let's start out here. So one of the big things is that polio and a number of these other things, they were not improved. The thing that changed wasn't the vaccines. It was basic sanitation. It was keeping ourselves healthier across the board, right? Not drinking where you pee. I mean, not to be too, I don't want to be disgusting about it, but I mean, when you're getting your water supply from somewhere where you've got, sewage runoff, there's going to be problems. Clean water, clean this, clean that. Those made a huge difference. Probably the most important actual medical advance in the last couple of centuries was antibiotics. But since then, I'm not sure much of it's made a lot of difference, except in causing problems. But, realistically, a lot of what's happened that vaccines were given credit for fixing had nothing to do with vaccines. It had everything to do with improvements in public infrastructure, with improvements in water, sanitation, different things like that. So when Musk's posts referencing sanitation is 100% accurate in the sense that sanitation is a crucial and foundational issue to remaining healthy. Am I wrong on that?
You're right. And I would take it one step further. And I appreciate his comment on science, too, because it's an ever-evolving process of what we think we know versus what we know. And we try to leave out once we poke holes in what we think we know, that's what you have as acceptable science until you poke holes in it again. But when you talk about sanitation, we talk about water, we talk about air. Again, back to that subject again. We talk about, body cleanliness, home cleanliness, and things like that, lack of mold and things like that. These are all sanitation issues, but let's go one step further. How about keeping us more sanitized on the inside by not bringing in toxic chemical filled foods and all these substances that are there full of garbage. So I wholeheartedly agree. If you put the body in a place that is clean with the way God intended, and you put in the body with the things that are clean the way God intended, you're probably going to have a good ability to fight back with the body God made to fight back. That would be my reasonable argument with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now let's hit the part of this that Elon and I don't agree on. And it's not that I disagree entirely, but I think that his statement is it's a little weak, right? It's a little weak. He says vaccines essentially training your immune system for battle do work well for addressing many diseases. Okay, so let me point out what Elon said here. He said the essence of science is continually looking at the evidence to lessen the error between your understanding of reality and reality itself. Okay, Elon, so let's look at that reality. And let's look at that. What evidence do we have of safety or efficacy with regards to vaccines? Now, I posted this, and I will show you this. I posted this. I said, if you want science, then you need to look at the actual existing science in vaccines or the lack thereof. Below is a list of all double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical studies done for any vaccine on absolute risk reduction pertaining to transmission, asymptomatic disease, and death, according to Grok. I've confirmed it in a bunch of places, but he likes Grok, so I pointed out Grok. I said, there is no science supporting vaccines. If you use a DOGE-style audit on the science of vaccines and many other drugs, you will see fraud that makes what you found in the government look like child's play. Let me explain that. This is from, I pulled it from a Grok conversation, but it's also based on data that I've got 100 different places. This is a table. I asked Grok to find every double-blind, clinical controlled, placebo-based trial where absolute risk reduction was tested for symptomatic disease, death, and transmission. This is it. We got how many? 70-some vaccines out on the schedule right now, right? Here's what we've got. We've got the absolute risk reduction for symptomatic disease from Pfizer, 0.7%. The absolute risk reduction for symptomatic disease, this for the COVID vaccines, for Moderna, 1%, and the absolute risk reduction for symptomatic disease from Janssen, 1%. We have one vaccine, period, of all vaccines out there where they calculated the absolute risk reduction of death. It was the Janssen COVID vaccine, and the total absolute risk reduction of death is 0.06%. 0.0, that's not a joke. Now, interestingly, everybody's talking about measles right now. No studies, nothing. The only other mainstream vaccine that was ever tested in any way was polio. And that study showed that the reduction of risk of symptomatic disease for polio was 0.041%. It has no impact. Vaccines literally do nothing. So Elon needs to do what he said. He needs to let science do what it does. Look at the science, Elon. Look at the real science. And I say science, and I urge you to do this. I'm pleading with you to do this. Let me sit down with you and have a conversation. Let Bobby sit down with you and have a conversation. Let someone who knows what they're saying sit down and have a conversation with you. I challenge you to look at the evidence and tell me how it is that we need to be mandating, supporting, or funding vaccines to the tune of trillions. I challenge you to look at the evidence and explain to me how it is that we should be providing legal immunity from these vaccines when they do harm when you look at the evidence. Mark, what am I missing? I know you got to go, so I'm going to give you the final word here and then on this.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing out the concept of absolute risk versus The other side of the coin is relative risk. A lot of
Yes.
the studies that are rolled out there, and people need to know this, seriously, folks, that the relative risk factor is used in studies as sort of a manipulative tool. Let me explain that just briefly so people get 1,000 people here, 1,000 people here doing a random double-blind crossover placebo study, the highest study you can do.
Yep.
Let's say they're taking a statin drug. And statin drugs, you follow these people for 10 years. And
Yep.
let's say over the course of 10 years in the 1,000 people group, you had 2 people over here have a heart attack and 1 person over here had a heart attack. What they do is relative risk is different than absolute risk. So absolute risk would be that, 998 times it did not work over here.
Yep.
And 999 times it didn't work over here. So it has no real effect. That's absolute risk, right? Yep. Relative risk, they take out 2 people here that had a heart attack and 2 people here because it's got a match. And they say there's a 50% relative risk reduction of using that. And so that's the trickery of it all. And that's how these studies are placed out there into clinicians' training. And that's the way they do it. So you're right on point. And you have been right on point. And I'm hopeful that, even if they don't get it, Elon and Bobby and even the president, I'm hoping people will get it and begin to really ask the right questions and follow up that with the right decisions.
Well, we're going to try and help them get it one way or another. We're going to keep fighting until it works, because we've got to have this sort of stuff. Mark, I know you got to jump. Thanks for joining us. Everybody, go to TimeRuns.com, Kingdom Fuel. Make sure you're supporting us. Make sure you're supporting Dr. Mark. Great products. You can go to TimeRuns.com. Go to our affiliate page, click on Kingdom Fuel. Make sure you're checking that out. And again, we're pushing the Kingdom Fuel today. We got H2, of course. But use the Kingdom Fuel. Replace 1 meal a day with that. You'll lose weight. It's a great product. I've got it. I use it. It's a wonderful thing. It is. It's a great meal replacement. It's healthy. You can also go to Sherwood TV/Tom Renz and get there. So, Mark, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Tom. Have a great day, man.
You too. Okay, so I want to go back to this because I'm not done. These vaccines, it is absurd what is occurring in this. And again, if Elon wants to talk about vaccines and the science, he's going to have to challenge his own view of this. Vaccines are not safe and they're not effective. And I want to challenge Elon to do this. Listen, you can say what you want about the guy, but no, you can't argue that the guy's brilliant. The guy is a very smart dude. He needs to get past what he's seeing here, and he needs to start recognizing that much like what he's uncovering with DOGE, everything in this industry is a lie and fraud. I didn't believe it myself. The reason I'm doing well with this, the reason that I am, have done good since 2020 fighting in the health freedom space is because I was pro-vax. I didn't know better. Until I started fighting, I didn't know better. But once I dug into this, you cannot argue with the truth. The truth of the matter is that this is an entire industry based on fraud. There isn't science to back this. The fact that they use tricks like telling you, "Hey, it's this drug will save 100% more people were saved that took this drug than didn't." That's relative risk reduction. That sounds great. But what Mark said is absolutely right. When you look at it and 2 people had a heart attack in one and 1 person had a heart attack in the other, well, yeah, that's 100% difference. But so what? It's still 2 out of 1,000. And what are the risk of side effects? What side effects are there? Remember, they don't disclose side effects. And many side effects get called adverse events of special interest instead of being called side effects. What are the rates for these side effects? They don't talk about that. What if you've got a 5% rate of a side effect on something that has an absolute risk reduction of 0.25%? That doesn't justify its usage ever. But that's what happens. They lie about these. These vaccines provide no benefits at all, generally speaking, and yet they continue to push these as though they're safe or effective. And you've got the New England Journal of Medicine lying about this. You've got the different medical associations, AMA, they're all lying, but they all know this too. They all know this. They use these alternative clinical trial designs where they'll use single blind or open label or active comparator trials or all these different things, observational studies, all these different things that they're using to justify the use of these unsafe and ineffective poisons that really don't do anything beneficial to anyone. What they do is make big pharma money. What they do is allow big pharma to fund guys like Bill Cassidy so that he can come up there and lie during Senate confirmation hearings and talk about, but it could just be that Bill Cassidy is just that stupid and that bad of a doctor. It could be that he doesn't know, because there's a lot of doctors, there's even some good ones, that believe this crap. Now we're seeing more and more of them wake up. We're finally seeing more doctors, more scientists wake up to the truth of vaccines. Joe Rogan finally getting there. I think Tucker's there. We got to get Musk there. We got to get Trump there. We especially got to get the Donald there. I love the Donald. I support him. But his take on vaccines, and particularly upcoming stuff with mRNA vaccines and cancer, he is dead wrong on this. You want to do an mRNA clinical vaccine for cancer? That's fine. After a 20-year study where we can determine that it's not going to mess up our genes and we can find the actual safety and efficacy, and those studies include absolute risk reductions for everything, if after that we can see that it's safe, maybe I'll consider it. Maybe. But right now, I've watched as the government, as Big Pharma, and as everybody else has lied to us endlessly. And what I cannot understand, God bless Donald Trump, I cannot understand how he can watch the 2020 election get stolen from him using COVID and see the money motives behind it and not know what's going on here and still be supporting this. You cannot do a 24-hour 48-hour cancer cure based on an AI analysis of your blood, and first of all, call it a vaccine, and second of all, know that it's going to be safe. If it's a personalized cancer vaccine that using genetic materials, then that means it is a custom genetically modifying entity that you're putting into your body. It can't be tested if it's custom. How do you know if it's safe? You don't. You're guessing. You're letting the AI guess for you. Based on what? Based on what? It's absurd. We're so far from this technology being proven. It's crazy. We will not have this technology proven or safe in the next 20 years. It would take 20 years of studies to come close to demonstrating this is safe. And the idea that we're going to push it out is obscene. Further, you cannot call it a vaccine if they're testing the cancer in your blood and finding a cure for it. That's a treatment, not a vaccine. So if you want to put out an AI cancer vaccine that works, that they can develop in 48 hours, I got an idea. Let's be honest with it and call it a treatment, not a vaccine. And let's open the doors for us to sue the people who are doing this. That way, in the next 10 years, when I'm proven right, and you see that these AI cancer vaccines are causing death and carnage on a scale never seen before, then we can at least sue and try and get some justice for the dead and injured that were too stupid to hear our words. I pray for them. I pray for America. I pray for everybody. Thank you guys.